Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Andy Kaufman. I've been talking a lot lately about this viral pandemic, and I've learned some things lately that have helped me develop a theory, and I think I know what is really going on here, so I want to give that information to everyone. I want everyone to know that I am a qualified medical doctor, so I put up some information about my background here. I'm board certified. I practice in psychiatry and forensic psychiatry. I also do natural healing consultation. In the past, I've worked in hematology and oncology. I've held leadership positions in medical school. I ran a medical device startup company. And you can see where I had my education. So I feel that I am qualified to talk about this subject matter, and I hope you'll agree. So what is it that causes us to make more of these exosomes and throw them out into our circulation? So it turns out that almost every type of insult to the body would actually cause this process to occur. So toxic substances, and I found several papers looking at this. Some of them looked at environmental toxins, such as heavy metals like arsenic, and organic chemical toxins. Also found evidence about bacterial toxins, and I have a slide that I'll show you in a minute. So there's clearly has a role in the communication or possibly removal of toxic substances that damage our cells. Now, interestingly, psychological stress, including fear, which many people around the world are experiencing in a very intense way right now, also causes release of exosomes. So you see how this may cause false positive tests. Cancer, as I mentioned before, lung cancer has many exosomes. Ionizing radiation, infection, injury, in fact, any type of immune response, so whether it be to injury, infection, or another disease, asthma. Now, many papers just said that exosomes are induced by disease, and they didn't mention anything specific, and they seem to be implying that virtually any type of disease can cause this process. Now, I really wanted to find evidence that EMF would induce exosomes, but unfortunately I could not find a paper on this. But I want to say to all of the people in this field of research on exosomes that this would be an excellent contribution to the literature if you were to look at this issue, if various, especially microwave radiation like 5G, would cause this as well. So I want to talk about the second paper, because this is going to help us merge these two ideas of a virus and an exosome, and are they the same thing? So this is also from the group in China. This one is published in the New England Journal of Medicine, and they had a slightly different protocol, but essentially it was very similar. So what they did is, once again, they did that procedure to get the lung fluid, and then they centrifuged it and just took the fluid, so any cells from the host, like any lung cells that might be in there, or bacterial cells, would be stuck in a pellet in the bottom of the test tube, and they just took the fluid off the top, assuming that if there were viral particles, they'd be in that fluid. But they didn't actually then try to purify the virus out of that fluid. Instead, they mixed it with cells that they took from a person who had lung cancer surgery, and they incubated it with the lung cancer cells. Now, you remember I said earlier, and I showed experimental evidence, that lung cancer cells make exosomes. So when they then purified particles after incubating this fluid with the lung cancer cells and then examined them under the microscope, well, were they looking at viral particles, or were they looking at exosomes? And I have two images below, and one is supposedly the viral particle from this paper, and the other is an exosome. Can you tell the difference? Here is another slide showing the functions of exosomes as they can remove toxins. So in the upper right here, these green cells are actually bacteria. And by the way, this image, all electron micrograph images are always in black and white. if you see an image like this has been colorized after the fact, and they did that to help you identify what is what. So I think this is actually quite a nice approach, and this is a real slide. It's very different from some of the slides that you've seen that are just computer graphics that are made by an artist. So these particles that they colored purple are the toxins released by the bacteria, and if they were allowed to contact the cell membrane, they would actually bore little holes in there, and the cell's contents would leak out and it would die. So what's happening is that the cell put out these yellow exosomes once it realized these toxins were there, and you see they're all budding out of the central area of the cell, and you can see they're basically swallowing up the little toxin particles. And so in this experiment, what they actually did is that they found that when they mixed cells with the bacteria, if the cells put out the exosomes that ate up the toxins, then the cells survived. If the cells were mixed with the bacteria and they did not put out the exosomes, then the cells died. So this was done, in a petri dish, not in a person, but so we can't say for sure, but what this is really telling us is that these exosomes help us clear these toxins so that they don't damage our tissue. So a very important function. I also wanted to take a quick look because there have been some recent reports that people who have been ill are having rapid recoveries with a couple of non-traditional treatments. Like, these are not things that would typically be thought of by the medical establishment to use for a quote-unquote viral illness. But there are certainly reports. There was a doctor in New York City who claimed that he cured several hundred patients with hydroxychloroquine. I think he combined it with zinc. Now, hydroxychloroquine was originally a drug for malaria, but it's used in the United States primarily for diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. And it is not known how it works in those illnesses. And in my experience, it doesn't really work at all in those illnesses. However, there has been a bunch of research trying to figure out what this drug does. And I read a review paper on this, and I found quite an interesting thing. So there are studies that show that this drug can release lysosomal enzymes. So I'll tell you that the lysosome is basically the garbage dump of the cell. So it's another one of these vesicles or sacs, and it has all these enzymes that basically just chew everything up, similar to what happens in your gut when you're digesting food. And any trash that is not working anymore, right, like proteins that have degraded or DNA that was copied in error or things like that, they get sent to the lysosome for destruction and recycling. So it breaks it down into the basic constituents and then is able to send it back to the factory part of the cell where it could be reused to make new molecules. But in the case of this drug, what it actually does is release these enzymes out of the compartment in the cell and into the cell cytoplasm. And this can actually be quite damaging to the cell itself. However, if the cell has been inundated with some kind of toxic substance, these enzymes could help break that down so that the cell could survive. So I think that may be actually how it's helping these patients. Now, vitamin C is the other one that has been reported to be quite successful. And a lot of people think that vitamin C really works by, quote unquote, boosting the immune system. Now, it does have an effect on some of the immune regulatory function, but I do not feel that that's really how it helps in these conditions. In my opinion, it is the antioxidant properties of this drug and possibly the blood thinning qualities that is what really helps this illness. So when you have a toxic exposure, oftentimes that toxin will cause what's known as oxidative stress or free radicals. And we're all familiar with, that it's recommended to take antioxidants and, eat special kinds of berries and things like that. But not too many people understand what that's really doing. But what it does is it kind of acts like a neutralizing sponge for these free radicals. It just soaks them up and quelches them. And what the free radicals do is they have like a chain reaction. It's like they tag someone and make them a free radical and tag the next person and make it a free radical. And then all these molecules end up falling apart and making a huge mess, and the cells can't function. So the vitamin C stops that process dead in its tracks and reduces that damage and prevents further damage. And in my opinion, that's how it works for this type of acute illness. All right, so I'm going to tie this all together, everything I've told you tonight, into what I think is really going on here. So what I think is happening is that, first of all, as I've reported quite a bit, there are really not pandemic levels of people getting sick and dying from whatever's going on. The numbers are far less than a typical flu season. However, there clearly are some people who are getting sick. What I believe is causing this illness is that there is some kind of insult that occurs that causes the damage, and then there is a reaction to it, which is the production of exosomes. And when we are testing for this supposed virus, we are actually testing for these exosomes, which confirms that there's some kind of unhealthy process going on in the body. Now, I talked about the things that can cause production of the exosomes, and I believe that those represent the cause of the illness. And I think that the possibilities are that there is some kind of poison. Certainly, there's lots of precedent for a pneumonia-type illness coming from inhalation of toxic substances. There could be the stress and fear could be the cause. It could represent a regular flu or pneumonia or even a bad cold, and whatever causes those would be the same cause. And lastly, electromagnetic radiation could certainly be a cause as well. There has been a major proliferation and installation of new 5G infrastructure. And there's certainly evidence known that 5G can have adverse effects on one's health, including damaging DNA. And that evidence actually comes from Los Alamos National Laboratories when they've studied microwave and radiation like they use in the body scanners in the airport. And I think it's quite possible that there is not one toxic exposure, but there could be different causes of this illness in different areas, or perhaps even in the same area between different people, that this may not be a uniform cause of the illness, but it does cause a similar constellation of upper respiratory symptoms. And these symptoms are not extremely specific. All of these illnesses, I could list off probably 20 different illnesses that would cause a cough, possible shortness of breath, a fever, and suppress your white count. So there could be several different causes of this, but I do not see any conclusive evidence whatsoever that there is any virus. And certainly you could see that the exosome and the virus are essentially indistinguishable from each other. So let me just reiterate that. So there is some sort of insult or toxin that you're exposed to, it causes illness, and then that stimulates your own cells to induce and produce and put out these exosomes, because they will send the important signal to your body on how to handle this problem. And part of that is they will actually eat up and, like a sponge, soak up these toxins so that they can be safely removed from your body so that you can recover. So what I'm saying is that COVID-19 actually are exosomes and not a virus that invades your body from the outside. It comes from within your body to help you, and it's a reaction to the real cause of illness. And that's where I'm going to end it right now and take questions. And I just want everyone to know that I have a comprehensive list of references for this talk, and this will certainly be published with us, and I will distribute this slide presentation to all of my collaborators.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Andy. Is it accurate? I'd like to start with the first question, if that's okay. Is it accurate to say that the day before the Wuhan breakout took place, the day before anyone knew anything was wrong, if you were to send a